"You are the fifth physician they have sent," said the woman at the window, without turning round. "You may sit if you like. I shall tell you exactly what I told the others, and you may write it down and be paid." "I am not a physician," said Sebastian. "I am the brother of a man who drowned on a ship that never sank." Then she turned round. Blackfin House stood 11 miles out of London in flat country, a respectable establishment for ladies requiring quiet, with a wall round the garden, and a woman at the gate who wrote down the names of callers. Sebastian, Duke of Jamesford, had been 6 weeks getting himself through that gate, and had done it in the end by the humiliating expedient of being a duke very loudly at a solicitor. The room was clean and cold, and had a good deal of light in it. Miss Winifred Alder was 24 years old. She wore a gray gown that had been washed to the color of a rain cloud. Her hair was pinned up plainly, and she stood with one hand on the back of a chair, and looked at him with an attention so complete that he felt himself being read. "Say the name of the ship," she said. "The Fair Return, out of Whitstable, 310 tons, lost with all hands in the gale of the 12th of October in the year 11, off the Scillies." He kept his voice level. "My brother Hugh was aboard her as a passenger, going out to Lisbon with his regiment's paymaster's chest. He was 23. "And the underwriters paid," said Winifred. "The underwriters paid £11,000 to your father's partner within 4 months, said Sebastian. "And the reinsurance in Rotterdam paid rather more, and the ship, madam, was uninsured for the 2 voyages before that, and insured for the whole of her value 9 days before she sailed. I have had a clerk on it for 2 years. Winifred Alder sat down in the chair very suddenly, as though her legs had been taken from her, and put her hands over her face, and Sebastian stood in the middle of a bare room with his hat in his hand, and understood that he was the first person in 5 years who had come to that house to agree with her. "Tell me what you saw," he said when she could. "I have written it 400 times. "Then tell me once more, to a man who believes you before you begin." She got up and unlocked a wooden box on the table. It was full, not disordered, not raving, numbered quires of paper in a small clear hand, dated, indexed, tied in ribbon. "On the 4th of June in the year 12, she said, 8 months after my father was drowned, I was at Wapping with my aunt to see about a monument. There was a brig lying in the tier off the stairs, and she was called the Santa Perpetua of Oporto, and she was my father's ship." "You were 19. "I was 19, and I had been in and out of that vessel since I was 11, said Winifred. "I knew her because of 3 things. Her figurehead was a woman holding a sheaf of wheat, and the sheaf was carved wrong 9 ears on one side, 7 on the other, because the carver at Whitstable was in liquor for a fortnight, and my mother would not let it be recut. She said it was honest work, and it should stand. Her fore-hatch coaming had a splice in the port corner where a spar came down on it in the year 9, and I helped my father measure it. And when I stood on the stairs and called out the name of her master, a man on her deck looked up. She set her hand flat on the box. That is the whole of my madness, your grace. I saw 9 ears of wheat on one side and 7 on the other." "What did you do?" "Everything wrong," she said. "I went to Mr. Vantage, my father's partner and my trustee, and I told him. He was very kind. He told me that grief plays tricks and that I must rest. I went the next day to Wapping with a constable, and the brig had gone down river in the night. I wrote to the underwriters. I wrote to the Admiralty. I wrote to the newspapers, and one of them printed a paragraph making sport of me, and after that no one would print anything. I stood up in a coffee-house in Cornhill and said it aloud, because I could think of nothing else to do, and I was 19, and I was shrill, and I was right." Her mouth twisted. 3 months later 2 physicians signed a certificate. I have been quiet in the country ever since, and Mr. Vantage is my committee, and administers my father's estate for my benefit, and comes every Lady Day to tell me that I look better." Sebastian looked at the box, and at the wall, and at the window with the garden behind it. "Miss Alder, did you ever write to me?" There was a pause. "Yes," she said, "in the January of the year 13. I had a list of every passenger and every officer's family, and I wrote to all of them. Yours was the 11th letter. I had heard that the Duke of Jamesford's brother was aboard, and that the family were people of consequence, and I thought—" She stopped. "It does not matter what I thought." "It matters a great deal," said Sebastian. "I never read it." "No," said Winifred, "I did not suppose you had." "My secretary read it," he said. "It came in a hand he did not know, from an address he did not know, and by then it was public that the Alder girl was disordered, and the county papers had made a joke of her, and there were people writing to me every week about my brother mediums and men with schemes, and a woman in Deal who wanted £40. He endorsed it, madam. He wrote on the back of it, 'From the young person at Blackfin, no notice required.' And he put it in a box with the others, and I signed the day's letters without looking, because I was 6 months out of mourning and could not read another one." Sebastian discovered that his voice had gone. "I have that letter in my pocket. I found it 3 weeks ago when I began looking for you in earnest. You had the whole of it in the year 13, the 9 ears of wheat, the splice, the Rotterdam reinsurance. You had it 4 years before my clerk did, and it was in my own house." Winifred Alder said nothing at all. "I am not asking your pardon today," said Sebastian. "It is not a thing to be asked in a hurry, and there is work to do first. I am asking whether you will let me get you out of this house." She stood up, and she was very straight, and only her hands showed anything. "On what terms?" she said. "Because I will not be got out as a favor, your grace, and I will not go quietly into a cottage on somebody's estate to be a poor mad lady who is looked after. There is a certificate with my name on it. There is a commission that says I am not fit to hold a farthing. I have been called mad in print. I want it undone in the place where it was done." "Publicly," said Sebastian. "Publicly in a court before all London," said Winifred, "or not at all, and I want the ship." It took 9 months, and it was the hardest work Sebastian had ever done, and he did almost none of the thinking. He had money, a name, and a carriage. She had 400 pages in numbered quires, and a memory like a ledger, and a plan she had been making for 5 years with nobody to carry it out. He hired a proctor in Doctors' Commons and a barrister of 40 who had never lost his temper in his life, and he went where she sent him. She sent him first to Whitstable, to a shipwright of 71 named Ambler who had carved the figurehead and remembered the fortnight of liquor, and was very much offended about it still. She sent him to a sailmaker at Faversham, whose books showed a suit of sails supplied to the Fair Return in the year 10, with a private mark stitched in the tabling. She sent him to the custom house to trace a brig called the Santa Perpetua of Oporto, registered in the name of a Portuguese, who did not exist, in the coasting and timber trade for 3 years, broken up at Ipswich in the spring of the year 15. "The figurehead," said Winifred, in the parlor at Blackfin, on the day they learned that. "They do not burn them. Somebody will have bought it." Sebastian found it in the yard of a public house at Harwich, where it had stood for 4 years holding up a signboard, and the landlord took 11 guineas for it, with the air of a man robbing a duke. And she sent him last to Rotherhithe, to a court off the river, where a seaman named Job Preing was dying of a dropsy at 56. Preing had been rated able seaman on the Fair Return. Preing had been paid £18 and a passage to Halifax in the November of the year 11, and had spent the £18 in 5 weeks, and had never got a shilling more, and had had 5 years to think about the paymaster's chest, and the 11 men who had not been paid at all, and about a young lady in the newspapers who had been called mad for saying the ship was afloat. Sebastian sat in that room for 2 hours and then brought a magistrate and a clerk back with him, and Job Preing made his deposition on the 4th of April and signed it with a cross, and told them where the crew had been put ashore in Ireland, and named the master, and named the man who had paid him on the quay at Bristol, and the man's name was Crew Vantage. The petition to supersede the commission was heard in the Great Hall at Sergeant's Inn on the 19th of June, before a special jury and a master in lunacy, and the hall was packed to the doors, because the newspapers which had made a joke of Miss Alder in the year 12 had discovered a very much better story. She would not let counsel keep her silent. She was examined for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and she gave her evidence with her hands folded, in a plain dark gown Sebastian had not been permitted to pay for, and she did not once raise her voice. They asked her about the coffee house in Cornhill. She said she had stood on a chair and shouted, and that she had been 19, and that she would do it again with better manners and the same words. They asked her whether she still maintained a story that 2 physicians of standing had described as a fixed and incurable delusion. "I maintain," said Winifred Alder, "that the sheaf of wheat has 9 ears on one side and 7 on the other." Then her counsel called the shipwright Ambler, who identified his own work, and the sailmaker's book, and the custom-house registers, and read the deposition of Job Preing, seaman, taken on his oath at Rotherhithe and dated the 4th of April, 10 days before his death. And then 2 porters carried in a figurehead 6 feet long, wrapped in sacking, and set it on trestles in the middle of the floor and pulled the sacking off. Sebastian, who had seen it 4 times, felt the hall go up like a struck match. A woman in a blue gown, salt-scoured, one arm gone at the elbow, holding a sheaf of wheat, 9 ears on the right, 7 on the left. The jury were out for 11 minutes. The commission was superseded. The certificate of the year 12 was declared to have been improperly obtained. The accounts of the committee were ordered to be examined by the court, and the papers went off to the Attorney General within the week. Crew Vantage was in Boulogne by the Saturday and never came home, and the underwriters had his houses, his warehouse, and the whole of what he had built in 5 years on the money of 11 drowned men. The master said a great many kind things, and the hall applauded, which was irregular, and nobody stopped it. And then, in the middle of that noise, before the jury had left the box, and while 400 people were still on their feet, the Duke of Jamesford walked out into the open floor beside the figurehead and knelt down on one knee on the boards. The noise stopped as though a door had shut on it. "Alder," said Sebastian, and he did not trouble to keep it quiet, because the whole of London was in the room, and the whole of London had been in the room in the year 12 as well. "In January of the year 13, you wrote me a letter. It set out everything that has been proved in this hall today, and it was in my house, and I did not read it. It was put away endorsed no notice required, and I signed the endorsement without looking, and you had 4 more years behind a garden wall because of it. 4 years, madam, out of your life, and they cannot be given back to you by any court." He heard somebody at the back begin to weep. "I have said that a pardon is not a thing to be asked in a hurry," he said. "It is 9 months since I said it. I am asking now here, in front of every newspaper in the city that printed a joke about you, and I shall put it in writing over my own name in any of them that will take it. I was one of the people who did not listen. I am sorry." Winifred Alder stood beside the wrecked figurehead of her father's ship with her hands folded, and looked down at him for what seemed to Sebastian a very long time. "Get up," she said. "Not yet." His voice was not entirely steady. "There is a second thing, and I have had 9 months to decide whether it was decent to say it, and I have decided that if I do not say it in front of witnesses, you will suspect me of pitying you, and you would be within your rights." He looked up at her. "I have been in your company almost every week for 9 months. I have watched you send a duke about the coast of England like an errand boy, and be right every single time. I would rather argue with you across a table for the rest of my life than agree with anybody else. Marry me." There was a sound in that hall that no master in lunacy had ever heard in it before. "You are aware," said Winifred, "that I am the most talked-of woman in London, that I have been called mad in print for 5 years, and that half these people came here today to look at me." "I am aware," said Sebastian, "that they will be talking of you for 50 years, and that they will have to say the word right." "And I mean to be a shipowner," she said, "not the wife of one. My father's house had 4 vessels, and I know the trade better than any man his partner ever hired, and I shall have my name on the register, mine, Winifred Alder, in my own hand." "I should have been disappointed," said Sebastian, "by anything less." She put her hand out, and he took it, and she pulled him up off the boards with more strength than a woman 5 years in a quiet house ought to have had, and the hall came apart entirely. They were married in September in a small church in the city, with a shipwright of 72 in the second pew, and the widow of a seaman named Preing in the third. The bride's gown was grey silk, chosen on purpose. Hugh's name was read in the prayers, with the 11 others. Winifred, Duchess of Jamesford, was entered at the custom house as owner in her own right of the brig 9 Ears of Whitstable, and afterwards of 5 more, and no vessel of hers ever sailed uninsured, or was insured for a penny above her value, and her masters were paid quarterly, whether they came home or not. She wrote a pamphlet in her 3rd year of marriage, plainly titled and very widely read, "Upon the Confinement of Women on the Word of 2 Physicians, and the Profit of a Third Party," and it was quoted in Parliament twice, and she lived long enough to see the law of it altered. The figurehead was never sold. It stands in the entrance hall at Jamesford to this day, salt-scoured, one arm gone at the elbow, on a plinth of Portland stone. There is no long inscription. Sebastian chose the words with her, at the kitchen table, in an argument that lasted 3 evenings, and in the end they cut only this. She counted them. 9 and 7. She was believed at last.